Bible Journaling 66. Which Bible should I use? Part 4. Welcome to our fourth and final video on the subject of translations. Last week we looked at several verses in the Gospel of Luke. Today we will look at the Gospel of John and a couple in the book of Acts. Okay, let's turn to John chapter 5. Jesus decides to go to Jerusalem to celebrate one of the feasts, and he comes to the pool named Bethesda, where people are waiting for healing. Let's pick it up in verse 3. In these lay a great multitude, impotent folk, of blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. Whosoever then first after the troubling of the water stepped in and was made whole of whatsoever disease he had. Now, some modern versions decided that verse 4 didn't need to be there. Now let's turn to John chapter 8. We're all familiar with this story of the woman being taken in adultery, and Jesus teaching the scribes and the Pharisees about forgiveness, writing with his finger in the sand. And when he said that who was without sin among them should cast the first stone. Well, they decided that most of that story didn't need to be there. So let's turn to John chapter 7. Nicodemus is speaking up for Jesus, and the Pharisees are arguing with him. And they say in verse 52, "Art thou also of Galilee? Search and look, for out of Galilee ariseth no prophet." And then in verse 53 it says, "And every man went unto his own house." Well, for some reason, some newer translations thought that that verse didn't need to be there. But when you couple that with the chapter that we just did, chapter 8, and they took all those verses out, verses 1 through 11, it leaves us with something that looks like this. Then spake Jesus again unto them, saying, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. It seems to me like they're trying to rewrite Scripture. Now let's turn to the book of Acts, chapter 8. And we'll start at verse 36. But the story here is Philip meets an Ethiopian eunuch out in the desert. And the eunuch is reading in the book of Isaiah. And he asks him, do you understand what you're reading? And he says, well, how can I understand if nobody tells me what this means? So Philip sits down and explains what Isaiah was writing about. He was writing about the Messiah. And then in verse 36, and as they went on their way, they came unto a certain water, and the eunuch said, see, here is water. What doth hinder me to be baptized? And Philip said, if thou believest with all thine heart, thou mayest. And he answered and said, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. And he commanded the chariot to stand still. And they went down both into the water, both Philip and the eunuch, and he baptized him. Now, some modern manuscripts take verse 37 out of the picture. I don't know about you, but removing that verse takes away from this encounter when the Ethiopian man received Christ. Okay, one more. Acts chapter 15, verses 33 to 35. And after they had tarried there a space, they were let go in peace from the brethren unto the apostles. Notwithstanding, it pleased Silas to abide there still. Paul also and Barnabas continued in Antioch, teaching and preaching the word of the Lord with many others also. Well, some newer translations decided that verse 34 wasn't necessary. We've only scratched the surface of this important subject. For more, I recommend you go to Chick Publications and look for these books and more. I hope this short series was helpful. There are so many different versions and translations out there, and each one has its special place. There are even comic book Bibles out there. In my opinion, the best translation for deep study is the King James Version. But ultimately, the best version is the one that you will read. God bless. I'd like to close with John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. If you'd like to contact us, our email is biblejournaling66@gmail.com, or you can just drop a comment below and we'll start a conversation. And until next time, God bless and Maranatha.